The sun hung low in the dusty sky of Urindor, casting long shadows over the small human settlement. The wind carried the scent of dry soil, and the fields that were meant to feed the colonists looked tired, cracked, and stubbornly unproductive. Jonas walked along the edge of the fields, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. He wiped his brow and stared at the horizon. Every day it became harder to believe they could survive on this planet. The soil was strange, refusing to hold water, and the sun scorched the crops faster than they could grow. The humans had tried everything they knew, but the fields continued to offer only struggle. Jonas turned back toward the settlement, his shoulders heavy. The other settlers were in the communal hall, quietly discussing the dwindling food stores. The mood was grim. Hunger was no longer a distant fear, it was a constant companion. The children played quietly, their laughter muted by their empty stomachs. Jonas felt a lump in his throat. Humanity had always survived tough conditions, but this felt different. This planet had a life of its own, one that seemed determined to push them to the brink. Then something unusual happened. A figure appeared on the horizon. At first, Jonas thought it was another human, but the way the figure moved, graceful, purposeful, was unlike any colonist he had ever seen. As the figure drew closer, he realized it was a woman and she was not human. Her skin shimmered faintly under the sun, almost like it reflected the colors of the soil. Her eyes were large and golden, and her hair was dark with streaks of silver. She carried a bundle in her arms, and as she walked, he could see small children clinging to her side, their faces pale and hollow from hunger. Jonas slowed his steps, uncertainty mixing with curiosity. He had never seen an alien so close before, especially not one who seemed vulnerable. The woman approached the settlement gates and paused. Her voice was soft but clear, carried by the wind. "I will work your fields, human," she said, looking directly at Jonas. "Just feed my hungry children." Others stared with wide eyes. An alien asking for help? Was this a trick? Some had heard stories of other planets, of aliens who came bearing gifts and left disaster in their wake. Jonas raised a hand to calm the murmurs. "Wait," he said slowly. "Let her speak. My children are starving. I have traveled far to find life, to survive. I ask nothing but food for them, and I offer my hands in return. I can make your fields bloom. I can work where humans fail." He thought of his own children, of the hunger that gnawed at their bellies, and of the countless nights he had lain awake, wondering if they would make it through the next week. He stepped forward. "We are struggling too," he admitted. "But we have little to give. Still, perhaps we can try. Show us what you can do. You will see that desperation teaches skills that patience cannot." Then she began to plant, not like a human, but with a rhythm and understanding that was almost instinctive. She murmured softly to the soil, as if speaking a language only the land could understand. Within hours, the ground seemed to respond. The cracked earth softened, water soaking deeper, seeds finding purchase where none had before. Jonas could hardly believe his eyes. By the second day, small green shoots pushed through the soil, a miracle in a place that had given up hope. The settlers watched in awe as Lyra moved through the fields, her children mimicking her gestures under her careful supervision. Each plant she touched seemed to grow stronger, sturdier, healthier. It was not magic, not really. It was skill and patience and knowledge of things humans had never seen before. Curiosity overcame fear. The settlers began to ask questions, learning from her, trying to understand what she was doing. Lyra explained the principles simply: soil balance, nutrient layering, the timing of sunlight, even subtle movements that encouraged root growth. Her explanations were clear and practical, and she did not demand worship or fear, only attention and respect. She reminded the humans of lessons they had long forgotten, that life on a planet, any planet, was about listening, observing, and responding with care. Days passed, and the settlement's small plot of land became the envy of everyone. Crops that should have wilted stood tall. The humans began to mimic her methods, eager to learn. Children ran through the green rows, laughing for the first time in weeks. Jonas watched from a distance, a cautious smile breaking over his face. The settlement had a chance. Perhaps they would survive. Yet Lyra remained distant in some ways. She never spoke of her past beyond the simplest truths, and she always kept her children close. Jonas noticed that they were not ordinary children. Their movements were quick, their reflexes sharp, and even in their small gestures there was an intelligence beyond their years. Lyra seemed aware of every subtle interaction, every glance and whisper. Her eyes scanned the horizon constantly, as if expecting trouble at any moment. Jonas respected her caution. He had seen too many who trusted too easily only to pay the price. But he also felt a sense of hope growing inside him. Perhaps this meeting was not coincidence. Perhaps the universe had offered them a gift, a chance for survival, a chance to thrive. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jonas walked into the fields where Lyra worked. The air was cool now and the sky painted with streaks of orange and violet. She was kneeling, her hands deep in the soil, humming softly. Her children were nearby, tending to small sprouts she had left for them. "You have a gift," Jonas said quietly. "The land, it listens to you. I've never seen anything like it." "The land speaks to all who listen. Most humans are too busy to hear it. But you," she said, gesturing to him, "you are beginning to understand." "We still have little food," he admitted. "But if you stay, if you work with us, maybe we can survive this winter. And together," her voice softened almost to a whisper, "together we may thrive." And as he looked at Lyra sitting quietly in the corner, her children curled at her side, he realized that the universe had offered more than just survival. It had offered them the chance to understand something deeper, what it meant to care, to trust, and to grow together even across worlds. The first part of their journey had begun. Lyra had arrived, and the seeds of hope were planted. And in the dark of the night, Jonas felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. A belief that humanity, even on this alien world, could endure, could adapt, and could rise to meet any challenge, no matter how strange or difficult. The days following Lyra's arrival brought a strange mix of hope and tension to the settlement. The fields she worked had begun to show life, and for the first time in months, green shoots pushed stubbornly through the dry soil. The settlers watched in awe, but alongside their admiration, a quiet unease lingered. Many had never trusted an alien before, and some wondered if her intentions were truly what she claimed. Jonas spent his mornings alongside Lyra, learning her ways. She moved through the fields with a rhythm he could barely follow, bending, planting, and adjusting the soil as if it were an extension of her own body. She explained the simplest things first, showing him how to feel the soil, how to notice the subtle shifts in its temperature and moisture, and how each plant had its own voice if one took the time to listen. "It is not magic," Lyra said one morning, brushing dirt from her hands as the children worked nearby. "It is understanding. You can do it too if you listen. You must not force the land, you must guide it." Humans forget that life speaks in small ways. Even here, even in this harsh soil, life is trying to survive. You must help it. The settlers were astonished when he reported the results. Many had given up hope entirely, thinking their efforts were useless. Yet now, guided by Lyra, their work seemed to bear fruit. The children were equally fascinating. They moved with quick, precise motions, planting tiny seedlings or watering them in perfect arcs. They often paused to observe the soil or the sprouts, pointing out details the humans had never noticed. Jonas observed them silently one afternoon and realized that they were growing faster than any human child, their intelligence sharp and their energy boundless. Lyra noticed his gaze. "They learn quickly," she said. "They must to survive, and they are watching you too. You can teach them patience, care, and curiosity. They are not human, but they are children nonetheless. Treat them as such." Humanity had always survived through ingenuity and courage, but here, he realized, survival also required empathy, understanding, and the willingness to learn from those who were different. Days passed, and the settlement's fields began to flourish beyond expectation. Crops grew in patterns the humans had never tried before, and small animals that had once avoided the barren land began to return, sensing life. Settlers whispered among themselves, saying that Lyra's touch had brought fertility to the land. Some were grateful, some were envious, and a few were suspicious. A meeting was called by the elders, and Jonas spoke on behalf of Lyra. "She has taught us things we never knew. The soil listens to her, our crops grow, our children will not starve this winter. Can we really turn away someone who has given us hope? The universe is full of dangers we cannot even imagine." She made no argument, for she knew that trust must be given and earned in equal measure. The elders looked at each other, and slowly, one by one, they nodded. A cautious peace settled over the settlement. That night, Jonas walked through the fields under a sky heavy with stars. Lyra's children ran ahead, chasing shadows and laughing, their voices bright and alive. Lyra followed them, tending the soil, her movements almost meditative. Jonas noticed something remarkable. The children seemed to understand the land as much as Lyra did. They paused, placed their hands on the soil, and whispered soft instructions that made the plants bend or grow toward them. Jonas's heart pounded. This was no ordinary alien family. They were something extraordinary. A sudden noise broke his thoughts, a sharp, rustling sound from the nearby forest. Jonas's hand went to the small blaster at his belt. The children froze and Lyra's body tensed. She moved in front of the humans, her eyes scanning the shadows. From the darkness, small shapes emerged, predators native to Urindor, drawn to the fields and the scent of life. They were lean, fast, and hungry, their eyes glinting in the starlight. "Stay back," Lyra whispered. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge of warning. "They sense weakness, they sense fear, stand firm." The predators approached, circling, testing their courage. Lyra moved gracefully among the settlers, showing them how to shift, how to plant their feet, and how to watch not just the predators but each other. Then, as if by instinct, Lyra's children leapt forward. They moved with incredible speed, making precise movements that distracted the predators, leading them away from the humans. Jonas watched in awe. It was as though the children were part of the land itself, using its energy to protect and guide. Lyra's methods combined with human determination, and together they managed to drive the predators back into the forest. When the danger passed, the settlers stood silent, hearts pounding. Jonas turned to Lyra. "You, your children, they saved us." Lyra began teaching the humans not just how to grow crops, but how to observe the environment, the way water traveled through the soil, how to sense approaching storms, even subtle shifts in the wind that could signal danger. The settlers absorbed her knowledge eagerly, applying it to fields beyond her small patch. Gradually, their own techniques improved, blending human innovation with Lyra's alien methods. Jonas often found himself reflecting on the lessons. Humanity had always survived against impossible odds, but here, on this strange world, survival demanded something more than courage or invention. It demanded empathy, observation, and collaboration. Humans had relied on themselves for so long, but now they were learning to work with something beyond themselves, something alien yet strangely familiar. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Jonas approached Lyra in the fields. She was kneeling, hands deep in soil, murmuring softly. Her children ran nearby, tending seedlings she had left for them. Jonas watched her, studying the fluidity of her movements and the calm determination in her eyes. "You have changed everything here," he said quietly. "We were lost. Now, I don't know if I have the words to thank you. That is all that matters. They will grow, and they will teach you more than you imagine." The night fell and the settlement gathered for their evening meal. For the first time in weeks, there was enough food for everyone. The children ate with hungry joy, laughter filling the hall. Lyra sat quietly with her children, watching over them, and Jonas felt a deep sense of gratitude. They had found a way to survive, to thrive, and perhaps to become something stronger together. That night, as he lay under the alien stars, Jonas reflected on the day's events. Fear had been present, yes, but it had been replaced with hope. Humanity had found an ally in the most unexpected form. Lyra had arrived with nothing but a request to care for her children, yet she had given the settlers far more: knowledge, guidance, and a spark of inspiration. The journey was only beginning, and challenges would come. Urindor was still a harsh, unpredictable world, but Jonas felt something he had not felt in a long time: belief. Humanity could endure, humanity could adapt. And humanity, when open to learning and compassion, could rise to meet any challenge, even one written in the language of alien soil and golden eyes. The first chapter of trust and growth had begun, and the settlers of Urindor could already feel the promise of life returning to their hands. The settlement on Urindor had begun to thrive. Green shoots stretched across fields that had once been barren, and the humans moved through them with a new sense of purpose. Lyra's presence had changed everything, her alien knowledge guiding the settlers toward a level of productivity they had never dreamed possible. Yet with progress came whispers of unease. Not every human was pleased with the change, and the longer Lyra stayed, the more some began to fear her. Jonas had noticed the subtle glances, the quiet conversations that stopped as soon as he approached. Some settlers worried that humanity's reliance on an alien was dangerous. Others openly questioned whether Lyra's children were safe, or if they were a threat. Jonas tried to dismiss the concerns, telling himself that fear was natural when faced with the unknown. But he could not ignore the weight of suspicion in the settlement. One morning, as Jonas inspected the northern fields with Lyra, he noticed a small group of settlers arguing near the edge of the crops. Their voices were low but urgent. Curious, he approached. "She's not human," one of them hissed. "We cannot let her guide us. What if she is here to spy on us, to weaken us? We would be starving if it were not for her." You are humans, yes, but that does not mean you must be blind to kindness or blind to opportunity. We have learned something today. Let us not throw it away out of fear. That afternoon, Lyra led Jonas and a few other settlers to a section of forest that bordered the farmland. Her children ran ahead, agile and alert, their senses sharp. Jonas watched them carefully. The way they moved, the way they noticed small changes in the ground or the air, reminded him of a predator in its natural habitat, calm, observant, and unerringly precise. They are learning, Lyra said softly, as if reading his thoughts. They must. The world is harsh. Urindor will test them, you will see. Shadows moved along the tree line, and Jonas noticed the subtle disturbance in the air, ripples that indicated movement too fast and deliberate for ordinary animals. Lyra's children froze, their ears twitching, their bodies tense. The settlers, sensing the tension, gathered their tools and makeshift weapons. From the darkness, the predators emerged. They were larger than the first ones Jonas had seen, sleek and powerful, with claws that glinted in the fading light. Their eyes were bright and intelligent, and they moved with a hunting precision that sent a shiver down his spine. Lyra stepped forward calmly. Do not panic. Watch the land. Watch each other. Trust your senses and your heart. Then, as if sensing the moment, Lyra's children moved. They leapt and darted with incredible speed, guiding the predators with precise motions that confused and distracted them. The predators hesitated, unsure of the sudden, unpredictable movements. Jonas and the settlers took advantage of the hesitation, using their tools and barricades to push back the threat. It was a tense and exhausting fight. The humans learned to coordinate with Lyra and her children, blending alien instinct with human ingenuity. By the time the predators retreated into the forest, the settlers were breathing heavily, their bodies sore but their spirits lifted. They had survived not because of force alone, but because of trust, cooperation, and quick thinking. After the attack, the settlers gathered in the hall to discuss the night's events. Jonas addressed the group, his voice steady. We have faced danger and survived. Not one of us could have done it alone. Lyra and her children showed us strength and skill, yes, but we all contributed. We must remember this lesson. Survival requires unity, understanding, and courage. Humans and Lyra worked side by side, tending the fields and reinforcing defenses. They built small fences, trenches, and alarms using both human engineering and Lyra's alien techniques. The crops continued to grow, and for the first time, the humans began to feel the satisfaction of progress instead of despair. Lyra also began to teach more subtle lessons. She showed them how to observe the skies for changes in weather, how to notice shifts in soil moisture that indicated underground water, and how to read the signs of approaching danger from the smallest movements of the animals around them. The settlers learned quickly, absorbing knowledge that would have taken years to discover on their own. Jonas often watched her quietly, marveling at her patience and clarity. She was not only teaching them about the land, but about themselves. Humans had always relied on technology and strategy, but Lyra reminded them of something they had almost forgotten: the importance of observation, intuition, and the willingness to learn from others, even those who were different. Her children grew stronger as well, and Jonas began to see the extraordinary nature of their abilities. They could sense danger before it arrived, anticipate the needs of the plants, and even communicate with subtle gestures that humans could not fully understand. Yet they were still children, and Lyra guided them with care and love, teaching them restraint, patience, and the value of cooperation. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, Jonas walked through the fields alone. The air was filled with the scent of fresh growth, and the soil was rich and soft under his hands. Lyra and her children were nearby, working quietly, their figures moving with grace and focus. Jonas felt a sense of awe. They had come to this world as strangers, yet they were shaping it, teaching the humans and protecting them in ways that were almost unimaginable. He thought about the earlier attack and the whispers of distrust that had followed. Humanity had survived countless challenges, but this was a lesson in a different kind of strength, the strength of collaboration, empathy, and trust. Jonas realized that the settlers were learning more than farming techniques. They were learning what it truly meant to be human, even when faced with beings unlike themselves. That night, the settlement gathered for a meal. There was laughter, the clatter of dishes, and a sense of warmth that had been absent for months. Lyra's children played among the human children, their voices bright and joyful. Jonas watched them and felt a surge of hope. The future of the settlement was uncertain, yes, but for the first time it seemed possible that they could endure. Lyra approached Jonas quietly as the others ate. "They will teach you more than I can," she said softly. "Watch them, learn from them. They are the next step not only for their survival but for yours as well." The lessons were difficult, the challenges real, but the rewards were extraordinary. In the days that followed, the settlement continued to flourish. The fields grew greener, the defenses became stronger, and the settlers began to move with confidence instead of fear. The predators had been driven back for now, but the humans knew that Urindor was still a dangerous world. They could not afford to be complacent. Yet with Lyra's guidance and the help of her children, they faced each challenge with a newfound courage. Jonas realized that this was what humanity had always been capable of: adaptation, learning, and rising to meet the unknown. The land itself seemed to respond to their unity, the soil rich and vibrant under their care. One evening, as Jonas stood at the edge of the fields, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he felt a quiet satisfaction. They had survived attacks, learned new skills, and begun to transform the land itself. Humanity's power was not in force alone, but in their ability to trust, to adapt, and to collaborate. And with Lyra and her children by their side, that power had only grown stronger. The first trials had passed, but Jonas knew that greater challenges lay ahead. Urindor was unpredictable, and the universe beyond their settlement was full of unknown dangers. Yet he felt confident that they could face whatever came next. They had discovered a new kind of strength, one that combined human ingenuity with alien insight, courage with empathy, and determination with understanding. For the first time, Jonas believed that the settlement would not only survive, it would thrive. And as he watched Lyra's children laugh and play among the green fields, he knew that this was just the beginning of something extraordinary. The settlement on Urindor was no longer a struggling outpost. The fields had turned green, crops stretched taller than ever before, and the humans had begun to believe that survival was not just possible, it was achievable. Yet with prosperity came challenges of a different kind. Some settlers, still wary of Lyra and her children, whispered about dependence, about the danger of trusting an alien so completely. Others argued that the humans had already done enough, that Lyra's help was extraordinary but not essential. Jonas listened to these arguments with patience, understanding the fear but refusing to let it undo the progress they had made. Lyra moved among the fields each morning as if the land itself were an extension of her body. She worked with quiet precision, teaching settlers new techniques for growth and soil care. She demonstrated how to layer nutrients in patterns that mimicked the cycles of life she had observed on her home world. She showed them how to rotate crops to avoid exhausting the soil and how to plant companion species together so they would help each other thrive. Every instruction was simple, clear, and effective. The settlers marveled at her knowledge, often repeating her lessons to one another late into the night. The children were extraordinary. Each day they seemed to grow faster, their intelligence sharper, their reflexes quicker. They had begun to anticipate what the settlers needed before they asked, bringing tools, suggesting solutions, or pointing out weaknesses in the defenses. Jonas watched them closely one afternoon as they moved through the fields, noting how instinctively they avoided danger, how carefully they cared for each plant, and how their movements seemed to guide the humans as much as Lyra did. "They are learning from us," Jonas said to Lyra as he observed them, "but they are also teaching us. I have never seen anything like it. These children force you to." He realized that survival was not only about tending fields or driving predators away. It was also about maintaining trust, unity, and a shared sense of purpose. One evening, as the sky turned gold and purple with the setting sun, a messenger arrived from a nearby human colony. The news he brought was both alarming and intriguing. Word of Lyra's extraordinary abilities had reached other settlements. Some were curious and eager to learn from her, while others were fearful, interpreting her presence as a threat. A small faction from the neighboring colony intended to visit, not as friends, but as enforcers, claiming that humans should not rely on aliens to ensure survival. Jonas gathered the settlement leaders. "We cannot ignore this," he said. "They will come here and we must be prepared. Lyra has helped us, yes, but we are humans. We must act as humans, too. Cooperation is our strength, but we must also protect what we have built." They were heavily armed, their expressions a mixture of suspicion and skepticism. Jonas welcomed them cautiously, explaining the work that had been done and the methods Lyra had taught. He demonstrated the flourishing fields, the thriving crops, and the small animals returning to the area. The visitors watched silently, their eyes narrowing as they walked through the settlement. Then a small incident occurred. One of the visiting scouts accidentally startled a native predator from the nearby forest. The creature charged toward the group, and panic rippled through the humans. Lyra reacted instantly, her hands moving with precise gestures, guiding the predator away from the humans and toward a trap carefully hidden in the terrain. The children assisted, darting quickly and guiding the predator's path without harm, using speed and insight Jonas could only describe as brilliance. The visiting humans were stunned. They had expected helplessness, fear, or chaos. Instead, they witnessed coordination, skill, and intelligence beyond their comprehension. The predator was contained, and the group stood in silence, staring at Lyra and her children. Jonas spoke first. "This is what I have been trying to explain. Survival is not just about strength or weapons. It is about understanding, observation, and working together. Lyra and her children have shown us how to survive on this planet. They are part of our community, and their guidance is invaluable. This is not weakness, it is progress." The harvests were plentiful, and the humans discovered new ways to store and share food. Lyra taught them how to preserve crops using natural methods, how to make compost and fertilizers that were both effective and sustainable, and how to anticipate environmental changes before they became disasters. The settlement began to feel like a home, not just a place of struggle. Jonas walked through the fields one afternoon, watching the settlers at work. The humans had begun to blend their own methods with Lyra's teachings. Some had invented simple machines to water crops more efficiently. Others had designed barriers to protect young seedlings from harsh winds. Every day brought small innovations, small victories. And everywhere he looked, Lyra's children were learning, observing, and guiding with quiet wisdom. "They grow so quickly," Jonas said to Lyra. "It is almost as if they understand the land better than I ever could." Humans have the mind for invention, yes, but these children have the instinct to survive. The settlers were amazed, and a few murmured in awe, wondering if it was another gift from Lyra. Lyra smiled quietly when Jonas approached. "The land listens to all who care for it. You have done well. You have learned patience, observation, and respect. These plants respond to that. This is not magic, it is understanding. You are learning to work with life, not against it." Humans had always believed they could endure through willpower and ingenuity alone, but now they understood that true strength often came from cooperation and understanding differences. As the season progressed, the settlement faced another challenge. A prolonged heat wave threatened the crops, and the soil began to crack again, deeper and faster than anyone had seen. Jonas and the settlers were worried. They had faced this before, but the lessons were growing harder each time. Lyra worked tirelessly, adjusting irrigation, teaching the humans new ways to shade the fields and retain moisture, and using techniques that seemed almost instinctive. Her children moved quickly among the settlers, offering guidance and assistance where needed. Together, humans and aliens managed to protect the crops. When the first harvest arrived, it was more abundant than any had anticipated. The settlers celebrated, sharing food, laughter, and relief. Lyra's children ran through the fields, their voices ringing like bells, and Jonas felt a profound sense of gratitude. Humanity had survived again, not alone, but with allies. That night, as Jonas watched the stars from the edge of the fields, he reflected on all that had happened. They had faced danger, suspicion, and the challenges of a harsh world. They had learned from each other, and through trust, patience, and effort, they had prospered. Humanity's strength had always been cleverness, courage, and adaptability. But here on Urindor, he realized that their greatest power lay in their ability to care, to cooperate, and to embrace lessons from those unlike themselves. Lyra approached quietly, her golden eyes reflecting starlight. "You see it now, human. Strength is not in force alone, but in understanding and observation and in unity. Your people are learning, your children are learning, and together you will thrive. Life is unpredictable, Urindor is harsh, but your heart, your willingness to learn, to protect, to cooperate, will guide you. Never forget that." The bond between the humans and Lyra's family had solidified, built on trust, effort, and shared survival. Jonas knew that challenges lay ahead, but he also knew that together they could face anything. In the quiet of the night, with children sleeping soundly and the fields standing tall, a new understanding had taken root. Humanity had discovered that true strength was not solitary, it was shared. And in that knowledge, hope and life flourished across the alien soil of Urindor. The settlement on Urindor had grown beyond what anyone had thought possible. The once barren fields stretched wide, their green leaves swaying gently in the alien breeze. The settlers walked through them with confidence, tending crops that had once been considered impossible to grow. Humans had learned much from Lyra and her children, and in turn, they had taught the aliens the value of persistence, cooperation, and trust. The colony was thriving, and for the first time, hunger was no longer a daily concern. Jonas stood on a small rise overlooking the fields, the wind tugging at his hair. He felt the satisfaction of hard work, the pride of survival, and the quiet joy of seeing life flourish under his hands and those of the settlers. Lyra's children ran through the fields below, laughing as they tended young plants, their movements precise yet joyful. They were strong, agile, and intelligent beyond their years, but they were still children, learning, exploring, and shaping the land alongside the humans. Lyra approached him quietly. "You have done well, Jonas," she said. Her golden eyes reflected the sunlight. "Your people have learned more than crops and soil. You have learned patience, observation, and courage. And that is more important than any harvest." Scouts had reported a group of strange, distant travelers approaching from the horizon. They were human, but their equipment and stance suggested they were from a more advanced colony. Jonas felt a flicker of unease. New arrivals often brought challenges, rules, politics, and expectations that could disrupt the delicate balance they had achieved. When the travelers arrived, they stepped carefully onto the settlement grounds. Their leader, a tall human woman named Marin, looked around with cautious curiosity. "I have heard of your colony," she said to Jonas, "and of the alien who works with you. We were skeptical at first, but we wanted to see for ourselves." Then, as if to demonstrate the harmony of the colony, a predator from the nearby forest appeared. It moved cautiously, drawn to the settlement by the scent of life, and the travelers tensed. Jonas felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, but Lyra was calm. She gestured, and her children sprang into action, guiding the predator away without harm. The visitors were stunned. They had expected chaos or fear, but instead saw coordination, intelligence, and trust at work. Marin turned to Jonas, her expression thoughtful. "I have never seen humans work like this, with an alien and with such skill. You have not only survived, you have prospered. It is in understanding, cooperation, and trust. Lyra and her children have taught us that, and we have learned well." Jonas noticed something remarkable. The visitors, once skeptical, began to adopt Lyra's methods and the human techniques they had developed together. A network of knowledge and cooperation was forming across colonies. Lyra watched quietly, her eyes bright with satisfaction. "You see," she said to Jonas one evening, "the lessons spread faster than you imagine. Humans are clever, but when they open their minds to learning, they grow even faster." Lyra's children became leaders in their own way, guiding younger settlers, teaching observation and instinct, and helping to solve problems before they became disasters. The colony had become more than a place of survival. It was now a center of growth, innovation, and hope. Yet, challenges still came. Urindor was unpredictable, and one season brought a drought harsher than any before. The settlers worried, seeing the soil dry and the crops struggle. Jonas called the leaders together. "We have faced worse before," he said, "but this will test us in new ways. We must work together, humans and aliens, to save what we can. We must work with it, not against it." Day after day, the colony worked tirelessly, facing the heat and the dry winds, their determination unwavering. Slowly, the crops began to respond. Green shoots pushed through cracked soil, leaves shimmered with life, and water pooled carefully in irrigation channels. The humans realized that survival was not about strength or luck alone. It was about observation, learning, and persistence. Humanity's spirit had always been resilient, but now it had grown in ways they had never imagined. As the drought ended and the first rains fell, the settlement celebrated. The fields were alive, the harvest secure, and the humans and aliens alike felt a deep sense of accomplishment. They had faced danger, scarcity, and uncertainty, and together they had prevailed. Jonas stood at the edge of the fields that evening, watching the settlers and the children laugh and play. The wind carried the scent of fresh earth and growing crops, and the sky was painted with the colors of the setting sun. He thought of the long months of struggle, of the fear, the hunger, and the uncertainty that had once consumed them. And now, seeing the settlement alive and thriving, he felt a sense of pride and wonder. Lyra approached him, her golden eyes reflecting the sunlight. "You have learned well, Jonas. Humanity's strength is not only in mind or body, but in heart. You care for each other, for life itself, and that is why you survive. Your children, your knowledge, your patience, they have changed us. We are stronger not just because we have food, but because we have learned to trust, to observe, and to work together. Jonas realized that the children represented more than just survival. They represented a bridge between species, a symbol of hope, growth, and possibility. They were living proof that humanity could thrive, even in a world that was alien, harsh, and unpredictable. The following weeks brought more visitors, settlers from other colonies seeking guidance and knowledge. Jonas welcomed them, showing them the thriving fields, the irrigation systems, and the harmony that had been achieved. Lyra and her children guided the newcomers, teaching them the same lessons that had saved the settlement. The settlers learned quickly, adapting the techniques to their own lands, spreading the knowledge further across Urindor. The settlement had become more than a colony. It was a beacon of hope, a demonstration of what humans could achieve when they embraced cooperation, courage, and empathy. Jonas realized that this was the true meaning of survival, not simply enduring, but growing, learning, and thriving together. One evening, Jonas stood on the hill overlooking the settlement, watching the humans and aliens work side by side in the golden light. He thought of the long journey, the hardships, the fears, and the triumphs. Humanity had faced the unknown and had adapted, not by strength alone, but by heart, by courage, and by the willingness to learn from those who were different. Lyra joined him quietly. "You see, Jonas," she said softly, "this is what it means to be human, not only to survive, but to grow, to teach, and to care. You have done well. Protect the land, care for each other, and never forget the lessons you have learned. That is the way to endure, the way to flourish." Urindor was no longer a hostile world. It was a place of learning, cooperation, and hope. Humanity had proven itself, not just through cleverness or bravery, but through compassion, understanding, and the courage to embrace the unknown. Jonas took a deep breath, feeling the wind on his face and the pulse of life beneath his feet. He knew that challenges would continue to come, but the settlement was ready. Humans had learned to work with aliens, with children who were different, and with a planet that was harsh and unpredictable. They had discovered the power of trust, patience, and unity. And as the twin moons rose over Urindor, casting silver light across the green fields, Jonas smiled. Humanity had survived. Humanity had grown. And humanity, with courage, heart, and understanding, would continue to thrive.